Hey everybody, welcome back to my marvelous miniverse. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made some tower ruins. It's going to be great. So I wanted to build some dynamic terrain for my players as they get ambushed on this old ruined tower at the top of the hill. I want to reiterate that I'm still a beginner crafter. I haven't been crafting terrain very long. So I looked around at a couple of videos. There's some really cool stuff out there. There's some really cool like resin molds and stuff. And Hall of Craft does some cool ruins with just with foam core. Most of the techniques I use in this build come from Blackmagic Craft's Ruined Tower video. And while I did use a lot of those techniques, what I create in this video is definitely a unique piece of playable artwork. It's not just a recreation of what he did. And since I am a beginner, this is not a tutorial, it's just a do-tutorial. It's just how I did what I did. If you want to just see some close-up shots and some flybys, then go ahead and fast forward to the end. That's fine. Just don't forget to leave me a thumbs up. But for now, we're just going to get on into how I built it. So I was pretty excited about building something out of foam bricks. So I decided to cut the bricks first, and I took my little cheapo wire cutter and I set the distance just one width of the foam, because half-inch foam that I'm using isn't quite a half inch, it's a little over. So I just set it to that distance and started cutting out strips. That way I knew they'd be square. And I just took a bunch of scraps and cut a whole bunch of strips. Once I had enough, or what I thought was enough, I reset my width there to 2 strips wide. That way when I cut the length of the bricks, I knew that they would be exactly 2 bricks wide. And then I just cut all my strips down. Made a whole bunch of bricks. Tons and tons of them. Then I needed to texture them, so I had some chunks of broken concrete. I figured that'd give them a little more texture, a little better texture maybe, than just rocks. I threw some of those in a coffee can with some bricks and shook it up. Shake, shake, shake. And this is how they came out. Just a little close up there for you. See all the texture on them? I think those little pieces of concrete worked out pretty well. And this is the base. So after I had my bricks made, I made the base, and I just glued together a whole bunch of pieces, cut-offs of 1-inch foam. And I wanted to have the different layers in there so that the players could have different elevations to climb up to. So I just glued together a whole bunch of pieces like that, and then started cutting them out with the little handheld wired cutter there. Cut it all down to where it was a little more even. I didn't want any of the pieces on top sticking out over the pieces on the bottom. That just doesn't look natural. And once I got it pretty close, I cut out a little bit and waved the wire back and forth to make those textures on there. Looks pretty good. I probably could have done a little better job, but I think it really looks like the hill itself is eroding away. Did that all around, and then I took some of those cut-offs and placed them around, textured them up a little better, just to give the faces on the other levels a little better texture so that it matched the outside. I hot glued a couple of pieces down inside the cracks, and then I went to texturing, and I just used this aluminum foil ball. Went all over the whole thing, because you don't want it super flat, right? Once that was done, I drew out a grid, which was actually a little more difficult than I had imagined, because I don't have a straight edge to start with, so it's all crooked, so I had to struggle with it and measure, but got one on there. And I drew it in, scored it with an X-Acto knife, and then ran the pin back through it. And this is another technique that I really wanted to try. It's joint compound. So I just filled in some of the cracks with that little spatula. And then I took the brush, watered it down, and just spread that stuff out all over. Mostly filling in those cracks and trying to keep it out of the grid that I had made. So I wanted to make sure that stayed there. That's pretty important for playability. I was really hoping that the joint compound would fill in those cracks between the layers, which it didn't really do. It hid them a little bit, but it didn't do what I hoped it would. Other than that, though, I think it looks pretty good. And it'll definitely add some more texture to it. I just used that pot lid to make a little circle on there so I could start laying the bricks out. And then I just glued a bunch of bricks down and a little semicircle around, which was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. So that's what it looks like when it was done. I made sure I had a whole bunch that had fallen down and make the battlefield a little more dynamic, something for the players to climb on. Which they did, and they enjoyed it. I did too. And then it was just time to Mod Podge. Mod Podge and black paint, again, thanks Black Magic Craft. Stuff works really well on foam. I just painted that whole thing up. Once it was dry, then I came back to do some colors on the stones on the sides of the face of the hill. And I started with green, just stippled that on kind of all over here and there. I didn't cover the whole thing, and once I was finished with green, then I came back with some yellow ochre, just put it on here and there, and kind of the same thing with the brown. It's just a regular brown, just to give the rock faces a little more dynamic color up underneath. Since I had brown on the brush, went ahead and started doing the dirt surface. Colored it all in brown, and then I got out some burnt sienna and some raw umber to make a lot of the variations in the ground surface. And I just kind of painted that around different areas, each different color, and did some wet blending of it, and just to make sure it wasn't all the same color. I think it worked out pretty good. And then it's time to do the rocks and the bricks. So I just started with green, and I just get most of the paint off the brush, and I just overbrush it. I don't paint the whole thing in. I just overbrush it and make sure all the little details in the recesses stay black. I don't like using washes if I don't have to. Anyway, that's what it looks like when it's done with just the gray, at least the cliff faces. Then I came up to the stones, bricks, whatever, and did them pretty much the same way. Just overbrushed them, or you call it a heavy dry brush or whatever. But I think it looks pretty good. It would look a little better if I painted the hell out of them and then washed them later and then repainted them. That takes a lot of time, especially counting dry time. I don't really have that kind of time, so I kind of cheap out a little bit, but it still looks pretty good, at least in my opinion. So after the gray, I like to use this beige. And I've talked about this beige before, and I really like it because if you put it on real thin, it just gives a gray color. So I like to dry brush with it, and I use my little unicorn brush to dry brush. And I just hit up all those little cliff faces. And that beige color puts a little bit of warmth into it too. I hit up all those bricks too. You can see the highlights on them. And for the final highlights, I grabbed some titanium white. And a different brush because the other one was wet after I washed it out. And with the white, I really get most of it out of there and just really light, go over really lightly. So I want just the barest highlights on there. And there you go, it's looking pretty good. A lot of color variation down in the stones. And with all the rocks painted, I moved on to the flocking for the flat terrain. Just grabbed some of that flocking from my video earlier. Added a little bit of Mod Podge and a little lighter green because I wanted it to be a little lighter colored. So I might as well mix that in now. And I mixed all that up real good. I started off using the brush to load it in the corners and stuff where I knew it wasn't going to be a big playable area. And then I switched over to using the little spatula so that I could really smash it down flat on the areas that we would be moving minis over. And just went here and there over the whole thing. That looks pretty good. And once that was done, I wanted to add some dirt and kind of rubble looking stuff, so I used this, it's coconut fiber. They sell it in the garden supply place. I just mixed a little water in with it first and then some Mod Podge and mixed it all together. I didn't bother painting it because it was pretty much the color I wanted it to be in the first place. And did the same thing with the little spatula that I did with the flocking. Just pushed it in where I thought it needed it, piled it up here and there, and squished it flat where we'd be playing it. So there it is. This is before it's dry, so it's still kind of dark and wet. It added a lot of detail. So I needed to make some ladders, so I took these little round dowels and I just cut some 1-inch sections out of them, cut a whole bunch of them up. And I took little square dowels for the uprights, and this is my first attempt. I tried putting the round dowels in between. Really wasn't working out, so I tried to stack them up on top. Having trouble with it, so I got some tweezers. That worked better, and that's just wood glue that I'm using. And I put them pretty close together. I tried to keep them to where the bases of the minis could fit in between there so that they could actually sit there on the ladders. And then I took some of those extra square dowels and I broke some of the ends off, and these are going to be the little trusses for the stairs, because every round tower has a circular staircase on the inside, right? Anyway, so I stuck those in there, just stuck them right in the corners, worked them in a little bit with some of that wood glue on there. I got a little too much wood glue on some of them. I just pushed it in there and kind of kept it looking kind of staircase-like. And it was about this time I realized I was out of coffee stir sticks, so I had to get some foam core out and make some little boards to put up there on the stairs. And I measured them out, drew them out, and then
use that wire brush, and I used it pretty harshly because I wanted it to look old and dilapidated. And while I was doing that, I realized it was probably a better idea to break this off. Then I could just put each individual board on there and stagger them however I wanted to, and then look a little more old and kind of hodgepodge put together. But this added a lot of time. If I would have had those coffee stir sticks, then I could have just stained them like I'm going to do the rest of them. But that's okay. They still look pretty good. That's just black paint Mod Podge first on those guys. So while those were drying, I decided to make my stain, and I just used this dark brown. It's a leather dye, actually, but it works good on wood, too. Leather dye works really good. And then I watered that down a little bit with some isopropyl alcohol, 70%. And then I just applied that to the wood itself, and this way you don't really have to texture it or anything. All the natural grain of the wood pops out. So it saves some steps, which I really enjoy saving steps when I can, as long as it looks decent in the end, and this stuff looks pretty good, I think. And then I also used that same stain on the ladder that I made. Make sure I get all the little ins and outs on there. And then I took a bunch of extra just broken pieces of the round and square dowels and stained those all up. And I went ahead and did a second coat on everything. And that ladder, I cut it in half because I needed 2 little pieces. I didn't need one big piece. Clean it up a little, and I just glued it down. There, and the other one over there. Pretty good approaches. And the other little pieces, I just glued them down here and there. Just add now. And then I grabbed the reindeer moss and pulled little tiny pieces off to make bushes with, and a little hot sticky, and glued some bushes here and there, and spent some time cleaning up all those little wisps that went everywhere. And I grabbed some trees, some of those little trees that I used in my forest terrain, same ones, just leftovers. Used the bamboo skewer to poke some holes in there, and a little bit of wood glue. Stuck the trees down in there, just a few of them here and there. I didn't want too many of them blocking up the playable area. And then I came back to the little wood pieces, and I painted them up brown. And then I put a little burnt sienna on them. I used the tweezers again to glue them down. They're pretty dark now still, but I'm going to give them some dry brushing here once they're all stuck down. And I think that looks a lot better using the individual boards than pieces. Clean up those wisps. And I just used the light beige and dry brushed them. Looking like old wood now. And I added a little bit more dry brushing to the ladder too. And last thing, test fit. Bad guys fit up there. It's pretty good. So there's the finished piece, the approach up to the ruined tower. A little closer view, a little more detail. It looks pretty realistic. And our adventurers climbing, ascending the hill up to their destination. Where they get ambushed by brigands jumping out of the shadows. And an epic battle ensues.
So that's the tower ruins that I made. I think it worked out pretty good. Players had a lot of fun climbing on the bricks and stuff. I had a lot of fun as a DM climbing my bad guys around on there. I think it looks pretty good. You guys let me know what you think. And if you make anything like this, I'd like to see that. Go ahead and head over to my Facebook page and post some pictures up. And if you have any comments or anything, please feel free to leave those down below. And if you like what you saw, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell button to get the notifications. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time.